Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Megaman 11. In the last part, we took out some more Robot Masters and now we're going to take out our final two after I grab myself the speed gear booster here. This is an item I intentionally grinded out in Acid Man stage. You may have been noticing in a couple places. I was just kind of mashing the speed gear on and off for seemingly no reason. That item only shows up after you've used the speed gear a certain amount of times. And what it does is, you may have remember back in part 1 I mentioned that when you use the speed gear, you're slowed down a little bit still, even though you still move faster than anything else around you. With the speed gear booster, you now go full speed in speed gear, so you're now much faster than anything else around you. I haven't really talked too much about the parts and their individual uses. For the most part, you can equip as many of them as you grab. There's very few that are incompatible with one another. For instance, the energy balancer is not compatible with the energy balancer Neo, and the difference between those is that the energy balancer standard is the one that we're used to seeing in the series, where weapon energy is automatically filled to whatever's lowest, whereas the energy balancer Neo fills weapon energy, albeit a lower amount, to all weapons. So, given that this game has the little mechanic of Rush constantly being active, that's theoretically the more useful one. I just prefer the standard one because it's what I'm more used to at this point. With that said, now it's time for Impactman stage, and this stage feels like a gigantic shout-out to Gutsman stage in Mega Man 1 because of all the construction theming. We even got the returning Picketman. Now, Impactman himself is a construction support robot built to withstand the toughest working conditions. Impactman mainly works on the foundation of construction projects. His body is made up of 3 independent pile driver robots who call themselves the Impact Brothers: Kui Ichiro, Kui Jiro, and Kui Saburo. He never hesitates and always rushes to action. His motto is just push through, so once he's accepted a job, nothing can stop him from smashing through in record time. Usually, Kui Ichiro, the oldest of the Impact Brothers, takes control when they're combined into Impactman, but sometimes the youngest, Kui Saburo, steps in when his big brother is worn out. Meanwhile, Kui Jiro is the unruly middle child who can't be trusted to take the reins. And this is a stage that very much shows off the power that most of the other special weapons have. Blockstrapper gets some good use here due to the good verticality. There's a good amount of shielded enemies, so Burning Torch can get a lot of use. This is a great stage to showcase your special weapons. At least with the route I've chosen. Technically speaking, if you want a good showcase of the special weapons and how broken they can get, Impactman's own weapon is a good example of that, given that it's much loved by speedrunners because it allows you to go out of bounds in a lot of instances. But we'll talk more about that when we get that weapon soon. Impactman's stage gimmick itself, though, is these moving platforms, and admittedly, they can be kind of slow. Because of this, I'd actually recommend, if you're playing through on a first playthrough, to come here after, at least make this like your 5th Robot Master in order, because that allows you to get Rush Jet first, meaning you can potentially speed up certain segments. And also, those are the Impact Brothers. During a couple sections of the stage, they'll just burst out and try to hit you. But now it's time for the mini-boss. This is the Pickman Digger. He's not going to be around for long because 2 Power Gear Chain Blasts takes him out. He'll spin his little shovel around, knock into the wall, cause some rocks to fall down that he can throw at you or back up into you. He can also make some of the traffic cone enemies fall on top of him. But he doesn't get much of a chance to do much, which I find out funny, given that he was one of the first things we saw in this game, given I think he was the ending of the first reveal trailer back on the 30th anniversary-ish live stream. It's also where we saw, I think I briefly mentioned back when we got Thunderstorm. In development, they still hadn't had all the designs finalized for Mega Man's various special weapon forms. Oh god, that was close. And one of them, as a placeholder for the Thunderstorm, was a design that looked a lot like Star Force Mega Man. And I remember distinctly a lot of people freaking out, going, "Oh, are we going to get a Mega Man game with costumes? That's awesome!" Unfortunately, that just ended up being a placeholder. I think costumes could have been cool for a game like this, though. It would have been something minor, just like maybe a Proto Man skin or something, maybe Base. Because at least they would have been in the game, because Proto Man and Base aren't in this game, period. A little bit odd, but I feel like they wanted to play things a bit closer to, not classic, but play things a bit more safe for this return outing, given that they weren't sure how successful it would be. They didn't want to make too much in the way of complications for the storyline or extra characters to voice. things of that nature. Though I'm grateful this game ended up being the way it did, because it's now, I think, one of the few Mega Man games that have crossed the million sale threshold. Because people assume that Capcom, Mega Man's always been Capcom's big seller, and no. That's always been Street Fighter and Resident Evil. Mega Man has only gotten, I think at this point, 6 games, maybe 7 that have crossed 1 million units sold even. And those are Classics 2 and 3, X1, Battle Network 4. I believe 11's crossed 1 million now, and I believe the first Mega Man Legacy Collection has as well. The reason I say maybe 7 is that maybe one of the X Legacy Collections and ZX Legacy Collection could have potentially crossed that threshold as well. Don't quote me on that, though. I'm not Proto Dude. I might know a lot of shit about this series, but he's still, like, the king of that. With that said, it is time for Impactman himself, who's weak to the acid barrier, so get that on out.
Tremble, topple, tumble!
Now, the thing you need to remember about the acid barrier that you don't exactly get to use a lot of unless you're just being super aggressive with it is that you can shoot pellets out while you have it out, and that's what he's weak against. Impactman likes to jump all over the place, creating little tremors whenever he does so, freezing you in place and open for attack. The main attacks he has, he can leave piles on the ground that can explode if you get too close to them. He can dash from one side to the other, but he'll get stuck on the wall. About halfway through his health, he'll use his power gear to go super pile driver mode like this, where he'll make basically a third of the stage at a time into a giant explosion effect. So you need to be a bit careful about where you are relative to him when he's doing that. Thankfully, most of his attacks can be jumped over or slid under, so not much threat.
Too spiky!
Don't get me wrong, he hurts, but as long as you're taking your time and not being super aggressive with your jumps, you should get around him no problem. And for beating him, we get what is arguably the most useful item in the game for stage traversal when you're not dealing with enemies. This is the Impact Driver, I believe is what it's called. It's a dash attack, almost, out of the Mega Man X series. You dash forward, good distance, even further with the power gear, and if you hit an enemy while you're using it, you will connect with them and cause an explosion directly off them, being bounced off of them in the process, at least as long as they're a big enough enemy type. That same effect also happens if you hit a wall. For getting through a stage quickly, going around things you're getting annoyed by, this is an excellent weapon. I also just really like the design of it.
Megaman.
Okay, Mega.
Yo, Mega. Can I interest
And
you
here's
in
another
some
good
awesome
item, the cooling
what you
system.
want, buddy?
I forget exactly what I did to get this. I think it's just using the gear system a certain amount of times, period. It reduces the amount of time it takes for the gears to recharge. And that is really, really useful.
Ta-da! All ready. Are you sure?
I think the time I'm going to use to talk about all the items we haven't gotten yet, let alone those in their unlock conditions, is probably in the Wily Castle, by the way, at this point. Because it's time for our 8th and final robot master, Bounceman. Who is really, really big. Now, Bounceman was developed as a crash test robot, but his incredible stretching and bouncing abilities led him to become an instructor at the indoor athletics facility Boing Boing Park. Wait, this is supposed to be an athletics facility? What? Innocent and optimistic, he can't help bouncing around and enjoy no matter the situation. He tends to accidentally bounce into people and send them flying, making himself a bit of a nuisance. His fitness lessons at Boing Boing Park are a new style of exercise he calls hopxercise. It's like boxing, but on trampolines. It's surprisingly popular with middle-aged women. His funny looks and big round belly are hit with kids, making Bounceman a household name. And this stage, as his name would incur, is based around bouncing. There's balloons all over the place. You're going to be bouncing all over. The moment you hold down the jump button, you bounce higher. It's standard trampoline physics, really. But there's some real annoying enemies here that, if you're not paying attention, can cause some problems. Be it those little bouncing balloons or the balloons that were the ones on the top of the screen right now, actually. As they are a bit of an anomaly in this game in that they're one of the few enemies that can only be destroyed with a charge shot. The mine on the bottom can be taken out without them, but the balloons holding him up can only be destroyed with a charge shot. I don't even think any of the special weapons besides maybe the chain blast can do that. It's a bit rare we see an enemy like that in the classic series. I think the only other time we've seen that from the top of my head before this was the balloon platform enemies in Flame Man stage of Mega Man 6, because you needed to charge shot them to turn them into platforms. Unlike what some people think on Twitter, where this was the first time they've ever done something like this. Am I calling someone out in specific? Maybe. You'll never know. Wink. And admittedly, it can be a bit odd if this is your first Mega Man game in that regard, I suppose. But if, depending on your route choice, you will have learned very early on that the charge shot can destroy certain enemy shields and therefore can destroy certain things that the main shot can't. So there's some idea of, yeah, but what about new people? But at the same time, depending on your route, you probably already figured that out already. On the first playthrough, though, this stage was a bit of a nightmare for me because of situations like this where I just felt the bouncing was really uncontrollable. But the biggest part that I can say, and the biggest advice I can give you, rather, is to just take your damn time. Make sure you're not constantly holding the jump button so you're just bouncing all over the place. Let go of it every now and then so you can take a second to absorb what's going on around you, and it eventually almost becomes fun. Barring one instance, and that's the mini-boss, because I don't like the mini-boss of this stage much at all. It's arguably, not even arguably, it is my least favorite mini-boss out of the 8. This is the frog balloon. In particular, the thing we want to kill is what's inside of it. Pump Master K, I believe. The best way to take out the balloon is to either mash the Mega Buster with it or use the impact driver, because if you place it just right, the place you need to hit is around the eyes. You can take it out in one shot, in which case I then recommend power gearing or just spamming impact chain blast to see how much damage you can get in as quickly as you can. It's not hard, it's just annoying because it's one of the few bosses that technically has 2 health bars, and in that regard it's just really slow to take out. Bounceman is not the best first choice stage because of it alone, almost, I feel. There's also just something very familiar about this stage. Mind you, it's like, it's not the first boss fight, or first Mega Man stage that's themed around a theme park in some regards. Technically speaking, if you count this as another theme park area, it's the second one in this game alone because of Blast Man. But let's see, we also had Clown Man, Spring Man, technically, Magic Man, and I think Purple and ZX was that too, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. I think that's all of them. There actually might be another amusement park stage I'm completely forgetting about, honestly, and I wouldn't be surprised given there's a lot of Mega Man stages at this point, to say the least. Also, this is me still to this day figuring out whether or not I like the energy balancer or the Neo version of this game better. Honestly, if you're a first timer, I would recommend the Neo more because it allows you a bit more flexibility with the weapons you're using. It's just that since I tend to only use one weapon at a time, I don't see a reason not to use the original more often than not. At least with my playstyle. Also, these balloon enemies have a surprising amount of health as it is, and I don't know why. Because not many other enemies in the game have that much health outside of maybe Sniper Joe's. Ooh, 1-up. I do not like the way 1-ups look in this game. I like the kind of crystalline look they got going on, but the faces themselves just look very off-model, like bootleg merchandise almost, and I don't know how to feel about that. I just realized there's a rock climbing wall in the background. That's a nice detail. I guess this place really is meant to be an exercise area. Huh. It's always interesting to me just how much you can notice in a game when you're not playing it versus when you are. I don't know why. It's just that extra little bit of attention when you're focused on the player character. Guess who's back? And this fight's really annoying because, I'll be real, I don't know how to dodge a swing attack on this bouncy floor. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just something super simple like bounce higher and then move left or right over it, but I don't know. This is one of the few stages in the game I feel kind of overstays its welcome a little bit. For the most part, the stages in this game are about 8 minutes long, and this is about that as well, at least on a repeat playthrough. But there's just something about the second mini-bosses and the amount of sections in it that makes it feel a little bit longer than it really is. Although I have to admit, I love this room. This room is very... The closest comparison I can think of for some reason is Mega Man and base version of Tengu Man stage when that's completely off the walls and not relevant at all. You're over a bottomless pit for a good portion and you're just bouncing around on tiny platforms, yes, but in theming it's almost closer to Astro Man. I think what it comes down to is I love this background. That's just really pretty. This game is really good looking. At the same time, though, this might be, in some regards, the least memorable stage in the game to me, and I can't exactly tell you why. It's either this stage or Impactman stage, honestly, that's the least interesting, because a lot of the other stages, if they weren't doing something new, they were doing something interesting with something old, such as explosions, electricity gimmicks, things of that nature. This is just relatively by-the-numbers bouncy area, and it kind of falls apart due to that in that regards, I suppose. We are nearing the end of the stage, though, so it's not going to be on for much longer. Then we're going to be in Bounceman himself, which is a different fight, to put it lightly. And as the order would dictate, he is weak against Impact Driver, so get that out. I don't get why this enemy's here. Alright, Bounceman, what do you got for us?
Bounceman! Bounce time!
Alright, get this. Bounceman bounces a lot. He'll bounce up all around the area, bouncing off the walls, but when you hit him with Impact Driver, he splits off almost like an incredible crash test dummy into separate pieces that you can still damage. The main body is where all the health is, though. That is about all he does. He can occasionally throw some punches out at you, but it's super rare. With the amount of damage you can do to him, he doesn't get much of a chance to do much. With his speed gear, he bounces even faster. And I think he's faster by default in superhero mode. And that's about it. He's arguably the simplest boss in the game in terms of pattern. It's just that sometimes due to his size, getting hit can be pretty easy to do. But for beating him, we get yet again another really good weapon. However, while the Burning Torch is good for shielded weapons, the Impact Driver for getting around stages and avoiding obstacles, and the Chain Blast for mini-bosses, this weapon is the best for random enemies. This is the... I actually forget the name of this one. Bounce Ball. You fire 3 balls that bounce off enemies and walls constantly. You cannot aim it up and down, but when you use the power gear, you fire 6 out, 3 from each direction, and this can tear enemies apart like nothing else, including the mini-boss of Fuseman stage. It's also Fuseman's weakness, as you'd guess.
Otto, do you have any idea where Wily's gone to?
He's totally vanished, Mega Buddy! Maybe he decided to turn tail and run! Huh?
What is it, Otto?
There's someone hijacking our signal!
Could it be?
Indeed it could! My genius neither runs nor hides!
Wily!
Light than you, Megaman! How dare you use my double gear system! Now you've crossed the line, I'll turn you into scrap myself! I'm at point E1685578. Come to my gear fortress. I'll be waiting for you.
Gear Fortress? That's all we needed. I'm heading out, Dr. Light.
It's time to finish this. Good luck, Mega Man. It's up to you to stop Dr. Wily.
Yes, sir.
You can do it, Mega Man!
Mega, be careful out there!
Okay.
And with that, the Wily Castle is now unlocked. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, we're doing the first half of the Wily Castle. It's a relatively short one this time around. See you guys then.